What is the most unexplainable thing that ever happened to you? For about a week before my apartment burned down, I dreamed every night about various houses burning down. I had a similar experience. In high school I kept having dreams where I was in a car with some friends and suddenly we were spinning. Well, we ended up getting T-boned, causing the car to spin. It took me a while to realize that the dreams had stopped. Now anytime I have a car accident dream I get nervous, but luckily nothing else has happened. Not totally unexplainable and can just call it coincidence if you don't believe in sorcery. When I was in kindergarten or maybe first grade, we had a blackout at my school, and this kid goes, "Wait, I'll light a match," and proceeded to pretend to light an invisible match and the lights came back on, and we cheered for him. Then he said, "Oh, it's too hot," and he blew it out. Then the lights went back out. Wizardry. I was outside talking to my neighbor. Suddenly it was like someone accidentally flicked the lights off and then back on. It was dark in the middle of the day as far as I could see for just a split second. I thought it was just my brain, but then I saw my neighbor looked confused as well. Then her daughter said, "What just happened?" We all were looking in opposite directions, so it was just suddenly dark everywhere. We still talk about it sometimes. No idea what it was. I've spent hours on the internet trying to find answers with no success. And 4 people saying that it was an eclipse. Don't you think I would have discovered that online? Also, it wasn't anything like an eclipse. This lasted like a blink of an eye. Others are saying it was a plane's shadow, which is really what I thought too, but when I looked it up online I learned a lot about it. Planes fly too high to leave a shadow, most of the time. I'm not saying it's impossible that it was a plane, but I looked into it extensively at the time and came to the conclusion that it wasn't. It was too long ago now for me to remember everything clearly enough or even how I came to that conclusion. I am a very scientific person. I've been literally trained in how to research, and I don't believe in anything remotely supernatural. I'm just telling you what I experienced, and that I didn't find a conclusion. I guess it was a coincidence, but when I was little I used to go outside in the mornings to pet a cat that lived under my home. I used to play with her every day. One night I had a dream that she died, so I woke up distraught, went out to our usual place, and I called out for her. She never came out and I never saw her again since the dream. When I was about 11 we took in a dog for somebody who was very old. He wasn't in great health anymore, but we were supposed to be his final happy home, since we lived out in the middle of nowhere. We had him for about a year when one night I just randomly decided to go outside to sit with him and pet him. I sat outside and laid down on him. He was a big dog, for probably an hour even though it was a pretty chilly winter night. Before anybody thinks we were leaving him out in crazy cold temperatures, he refused to go indoors, and we kept a space heater in a sheltered area he would lay down in. I don't know what possessed me to say it, but I gave him a big hug right before I went inside and told him it was okay to go. The next morning, my mom woke me up to tell me that he had passed away in the night. I helped her move his body to somewhere not out in the middle of the open so the owner could come say their final goodbye, and that was it. Honestly, I still don't understand how I knew, but I think I just empathized with his pain and told him it was okay to let go and not have to keep living for us. One night, when I was about 16 years old, I swear I glitched into the Matrix or something. I'd finally decided to get off my computer and go to bed, around 2 AM, if memory serves me correctly. At that time my family and I lived in a decently sized 2-story house. The staircase to the second floor was pretty basic. Head up a few steps, turn on a landing halfway up, traverse the remaining few steps, and at the top you're only a couple of footfalls from my bedroom door. Someone please explain to me, then, how I got lost on this effing staircase. Sure, it was dark, but even then you'd have to be a special kind of stupid to not know how to walk up these stairs after you've already done it 1,000 times before. Just keep one hand on the railing and you don't need to use your eyes. I swear that as soon as I reached the landing I spent 10 minutes just continually walking upwards. Realistically it only takes someone 5 to 7 seconds to walk up these stairs, 3 if they're running or skipping steps. I realized I'd been walking for much longer than that, stopped, and immediately felt uneasy. I'd walked up those stairs in pitch black darkness so many times before, but even with my hand on the railing I was getting nowhere, just endlessly walking upwards. My effing skin crawled. If my brother hadn't turned on the upstairs hallway light, I'm not sure I would have made it to my bedroom. Guy blinked sleepily at me and asked me if I was okay, and all I could say was, I legitimately have no idea. Told him the next day what had happened and he told me that the reason he'd come out of his room in the first place was because he'd heard footsteps on the stairs for several minutes. What the F, man? What was that? I wasn't so tired that I just mindlessly walked up and down the stairs for a while. I was completely awake, and not once did it suddenly feel like I'd turned around to walk back downstairs at any time. I still get chills thinking about it. I was walking to my friend's house one summer, maybe 10 or 11 years old. Anyways, sunny day, couple clouds but otherwise it's bright out. Perfect visibility, when a perfectly rectangular shadow comes up from the direction behind me on the ground, maybe 15 feet x 30 feet in size. Traveling just faster than a car probably would be and goes over top of me. I'm looking at the shape on the ground as it goes over, and when I do look up to the sky I don't see anything that could have possibly cast it. Even the clouds were just trailing little wisps. I looked back down and it was going over some houses, and then it was gone forever. So yeah, weirdest thing was a mystery rectangle shadow. Years ago, my buddy and a friend of his are out in the boonies, lighting off fireworks for the 4th of July. We go out to the cars to light the stick for igniting the fireworks. As my buddy's buddy is in the car doing so, I look up at all the stars, completely unused to seeing so many. As I'm looking, something just feels off. I finally pinpoint it and start squinting my eyes, looking away and back. Everything I can think of to make sure that I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing. It's one point of light absolutely identical to the stars around it, except for one weirdness. It's doing a steady, repeating figure 8. I turn to my buddy to ask him about it and I see him staring at the same area of sky. So I ask him, do you see what I see? I hadn't said a word about what I saw, but he answered back, a star doing a figure 8? I've tried to explain it by any logical means over the years, but nothing quite matches up and I refuse to accept that a figure 8 in space is the alien teenager version of doing donuts in a parking lot. When I was about 10 years old I woke up and had no recollection of the day before. I told my little brother and he said he had the same problem. I however didn't believe him because he was 8 and thought it was funny where I was mildly concerned. I think he thought it was a game and we were playing some pretend game. This of course made my folks think it was a game and no one took me seriously. All I wanted was for someone to tell me something about yesterday to jog my memory but no one did. Still have no idea what happened. That was over 30 years ago and I'm the only one who remembers not remembering. Was home alone with my sister who was about 3 at the time. She's sleeping in my room and I walk out to go to the bathroom. No one else is in the house but as I'm in there handling business I start hearing the chairs moving in the kitchen. I come out of the restroom and look to my left where I find the dining table chair moved and placed perfectly staring down the hallway. Go back to check on my sister and she's still sleeping. Walk around the house to see if my parents were home and nothing. Doors and windows were shut. No way wind could have pushed this chair 5 feet and turned it to face down the hall. During this time I was constantly being woken up at 3 AM almost every night and felt a cold hand placed on my left pec over my heart. Spooky-ish. I was at home with my mom. Nobody else. There were only 2 entrances, one at the front, where I was sitting nearby, and one at the back of the house. And it directly went to the kitchen where my mom was. And then I heard clearly my dad voice calling. Sounded like from the living room. He was working at the time. But I came to the living room anyway and found my mom there. She asked me, did you hear that too? Nobody was there. When he came home, we asked him, but of course he said it was not him. At first I thought he lied. My dad really loved to prank us, but then there was no way he sneaked silently without me and my mom not knowing it. When I was 9 years old, my best friend and I were crossing a busy street on the way home from school. Normally we were careful, but I was distracted by a black cat following us down the road. We stopped and she bent down to pat him while I turned around to cross the street, not thinking to look both ways. A silver car was directly to my right, about to hit me. I froze up, like a deer in headlights. My friend was screaming. Then suddenly it was on my left. It didn't swerve. Wasn't in another lane, the car was just suddenly on my other side, speeding away. I ran across the rest of the road and my friend asked how I had passed through the car. Everything looked a bit strange. Her shape was fuzzy and doubled. It was a clear day and the sun was shining, even though it had been overcast and windy on the other side of the road. When I glanced back, the black cat was staring at me from the other side. Then he just strolled away. I know it was just an optical illusion and I had probably just missed the car by a fraction of a second, and was just rattled later. I thought about it 4 years afterwards though. At a lunch table in high school, I exasperatedly put my head down and had a thought in the form of a question. My best friend a few seats down responded to my question and everyone looked at her. I asked if I said it out loud and everyone agreed I had said nothing. It was weird. We've been friends since 7th grade. I was at her wedding and was in the room with her and her husband when she gave birth to her daughter. We still make jokes about that time she read my mind in high school, lol. Walked from my bedroom down the hallway to the kitchen. Stepped through the doorway just as a ball of lightning arced across the room. I blinked and was back in my bedroom without passing the space in between. Crept back up the hall and saw my housemate standing in the kitchen, mouth opening and closing because he had no idea what had happened either. Turns out he'd clamped the power cable for the sandwich press between the hot plates and burned through it. Thus the lightning. Doesn't explain how I teleported from one end of the house to the other. I didn't personally witness this, but at the time my family was sufficiently freaked out by it and it was talked about a lot. One morning, my autistic brother went into my parents' room at like 3 AM. He woke them up to tell them that his grandmother was very old and was going to die. They got a call later that day that she indeed died in her sleep that night, but he's autistic and significantly disabled, so it's not like we could just ask him how he knew that or why he said it. He did a lot of other weird psychic shit over the years, but that was the spookiest one. One night, I was having stomach cramps and they were really bad. I was rocking back and forth and then comes my kitten, looks at me and jumps on my lap, goes to my stomach and starts purring really hard. I just sat there wondering what is he doing, and when he stopped purring, he just sat in my lap and my cramps were starting to leave. That was THR most weirdest and coolest thing that ever happened to me. Miss my cat. Was hanging out with my friend while we were roommates, and something came up about ships in bottles. He insisted that I talked about ships in bottles frequently for several months before that point, but I honestly don't recall talking or even thinking about them really ever. His girlfriend even backed him up. I call it ship in a bottle syndrome. I was at my parents' staying over for the weekend, and woke up in the morning with the desire to creep on old classmates on FB. There was a girl I kind of liked in band class who was a grade under me who my brother's friends knew, but I never talked to her. I decided to look her up in addition to others on FB to see what she was like now several years on. We graduated from a large high school in suburbs and I hadn't thought of her much since I graduated. A few minutes after seeing her page, the phone at my parents' house rings. I lazily walk over to their phone to see if my parents or brother were phoning. I pick it up and check the caller ID, and in horror I freeze as I read her name on the display. Immediately I begin to think I've done something in error unbeknownst to me while on her FB page, which alerted her to my creeping and has triggered her call. I cannot answer it. I verify the number on the caller ID with FB to see it is indeed her and sit in shock, dumbstruck about how this unlikely event occurred and wondering the reason for it. My brother arrived at my parents a little later and I told him who called. He actually had her number on his cell and he sends her a text asking why she called my parents' place. She responds back that she didn't place a call but that it was just an accidental but dial. Weird.